wherein basically you will look at one's, we will look at, in this case in the Philippines, the DPWH. We will look at their construction projects, their road projects, and what we will do is we will disclose material project information, and there will be a group, in fact a group called the COS Philippine Foundation has been set up. It's a multi-stakeholder group, and what they actually do is look at the information and then publish it. And the information will be audited also by COA, the Commission on Audit, and this will be published in a WordSite. And for this, they have looked at like 10 projects, and through this, by exposing and keep making disclosing the information, we want to keep these projects above board. The key achievements of this program, if you look at it from a global basis, is that there's been disclosure and assurance on 81 projects from 29 procuring entities. These projects cover construction projects in 8 different sectors with values ranging from $1 million projects to about $500 million. So this is an example of a PPP arrangement that can be done. I mean, one of the keys to governance and ensuring the governance work is disclosure, and having the right people doing the disclosure and having the information. So this can discourage, corruption. So this program. So this is one example. Another example, and I want to turn down the next slide, please. And this is quite relevant because in July, the government issued EO on mining, and one of the initiatives that's listed particularly is the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, EITI. And EITI is really, it's actually a governance mechanism. It's actually hosted in Norway, and the World Bank Group the World Bank is actually being empowered by Norway as one of its sort of implementing agencies. And what the World Bank does is it works with partner countries who are interested in EITI. And the name of the game in EITI is disclosure, particularly on revenues. What the main idea here is mining companies will disclose how much money they give to government, and then government will take an account of this and say what their spending is on. And in fact, we recently had people come in from the World Bank, and led by Secretary Gosson, there's an effort to look into EITI. The key to making EITI work is you got to create a multi-stakeholder group that is representative of the private sector, CSOs, all the main stakeholders in mining, including the government. Have this group be a cohesive working group that can then decide, okay, exactly how do we want to engage in EITI? For example, details like in terms of revenue disclosure, do we have disclosures on an aggregate basis? Do we say, okay, mining companies, all of you give X, and government gets X, and government uses this money, and government can then disclose what they use the money for. Or you can go a little further and say, government, mining company X, Y, and Z, each of them will say exactly what they give to government. Government then collects that and then says how they're using the money. Do we disclose what we give to national government? Do we disclose what we give to local government? These type of details, this group can decide. And the group can decide what type of issues they want to tackle. They want to tackle national revenues, subnational revenues. They can also go into, like in Philippines, a big issue is about small-scale mining. Do you want to get into that? So this is the type initiative that you have. Now, as I mentioned, this is a global initiative. There are now 35 countries that are in EITI. 14 of which are compliant, and 21 are looking to become candidates. This is monitored quite strictly, and actually countries who are qualified can be taken out, okay, or booted out of EITI. So it's really one of these global initiatives that really makes countries accountable for this, and it's been quite successful in a number of countries in enhancing the mining industry. So it'll be interesting to see how the Philippines tackles this now that I think with the EO, you know, they have now a roadmap or start of a roadmap for what the Philippines wants to do in mining. Next, please. The other one of the other examples is what we call public-private dialogue. We use this in the World Bank Group. Specific to the Philippines is what we do for the Philippine Development Forum, which again I mentioned earlier is a forum where the World Bank is a co-chair and the government through the Secretary of Finance is the other co-chair, wherein we have a, this Philippine Development Forum is highlighted by this annual meeting that we have between donors, government, and other stakeholders, including the private sector and CSOs. Though to lead up to such a meeting, we have different groups that engage in various topics leading to this annual meeting that we have. For example, in the case of the IFC, we engage with in the Growth and Investment Climate Group. So our focus is on these type of issues. And in this stakeholder group, we have private sector. We have the DTI, for example, is our co-chair of this group. And we bring in other stakeholders to discuss relevant issues, particularly on issues of competitiveness. One of the things that the World Bank Group does is the Doing Business survey. And in the last few years, we've been pretty bad in the Doing Business survey. We're in 130s out of 180. So while I think Philippines has done well with some of the other surveys, there's the Doing Business survey, which is really a survey on business entry. We have not done well. A lot of it's because we have a tendency to keep adding procedures. I mean, compared to other countries, we have the most number of procedures. And so whatever we try to do to reduce the cost and the time, whatever we do is marginal at best because we're not dealing with the fundamental problem, which is really about lessening the number of procedures. Simply, I mean, this is simply when you actually try to get a permit, this is what you encounter. And so this is a very important survey that, fortunately, right now the government's very focused. The National Competitive Council, Bill Luz, is really focused on trying to see what we can do to improve this. So, so this is one example where we have a group that's working together as part of the Philippine Development Forum, focused on trying to help us improve in our governance survey. Because these are global surveys, and this is something the government values. Next, please. On this one, this is Singapore. Basically, just quickly, what this does is the Singapore government has a mechanism from which if there are complaints by the private sector, and this is in particular to red tape, you can actually use this panel and get your issues resolved. And in the case of the here, it's interesting that this is actually chaired by the head of the civil service in Singapore. By the way, the civil service head actually deals with red tape. So actually you get the full attention of you get the right person who's on top of this. So he actually has to listen to your issues. So Singapore, by the way, in many of the surveys, governance survey, is either the number one or number two. On the Doing Business First survey, for example, Singapore is usually number one. So this is just a simple example. I just want to show what countries do in order to try to improve their, so that when businesses come here, they have issues, there's a way for them to complain and to have an immediate response. Next, please. So let me just end this by saying that, you know, I've shown you very sort of different examples here. I think we should continue, and I would encourage you to continue to have public-private partnerships in relation to dealing with corruption. This is like this Integrity Summit. I would encourage you to do so. I think right now, with the way the government is really heading this on, this is no longer an uncomfortable subject to talk about. In fact, it's a subject that we, I think, feel engaged to talk about. So, you know, I think for us as part of the World Bank Group, we are very encouraged by what's happening in the country, and we feel that certainly as our partners, the government is one that we can work with, and I think we have been engaging with them, and we hope to contribute in whatever way we can as a global institution of knowledge to impart, to help the Philippine government and also the other stakeholders like our private sector groups as well. Let me just end by saying that, you know, yesterday I was at the mid-year economic briefing, and I was, you know, talking to the government and I was saying, you know, the economic team, you know, you guys have done a really good job in really turning around the image of the Philippines in terms of governance. Because we, as part of the World Bank Group, we certainly have been doing stakeholders surveys, stakeholder engagement, and, you know, it's very clear as far as the national government is concerned, the trust is back and the trust is there. But let me just say that if I may use the first Kuwaiti-Iraq war as an analogy, the government can only provide air cover, right? And you cannot win a war with air cover alone. Corruption, you need trench warfare. You have warfare on corruption. So that means local governments, each and every one of us, have to be involved, because this is not, you know, this is not something that's up there. It's down here. And we need hand-to-hand combat. We need to bring in the army and the troops. And frankly, that's us. The national government can only do so much. So corruption is something that we all have to deal with everywhere, together, and together we can then succeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ang. I love that analogy, corruption and trench warfare. I think we also need to get more soldiers to be involved in this war against corruption. Anyway, for our next speaker, we have Mr. Gerardo Pancho. He will walk us through his company's journey and the experience in getting back into the list of DPWH suppliers of World Bank infrastructure projects after the company strengthened its integrity practices.